The old man stood in the middle of the glass tower lobby with trembling hands and dusty shoes while executives in $1,000 suits walked past him as if he didn't exist. His faded gray jacket carried the smell of machine oil and rain, and the security guard had already asked him twice to move away from the entrance. Nobody in that shining building knew that the man quietly staring at the marble floor was the reason the company existed at all. And just 30 minutes later, the entire world would watch a billionaire walk away from a $10 billion deal for one heartbreaking reason, because they refused to respect the man who built everything from nothing. Before we begin this emotional story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House if you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world. Stories like this remind us that success means nothing if we forget the people who helped us rise. The morning sun spilled across the streets of Chicago, painting the city in warm gold as thousands of workers rushed through another ordinary weekday. Inside the towering headquarters of Nexer Dynamics, excitement buzzed through every hallway. News channels waited outside with cameras ready. Investors from 3 countries had flown in overnight. Reporters whispered about the historic acquisition that would make headlines across the world. The company was about to sell for $10 billion. At the center of it all was Rowan Mercer, the founder and CEO of Nexer Dynamics. At 48 years old, Rowan had the calm face of a man who had fought through storms nobody else could see. His sharp navy suit and silver watch made him look powerful, but behind his tired eyes lived memories that never left him. Everyone saw the billionaire. Very few remembered the frightened 20-year-old mechanic who once slept in a broken van behind a factory because he had nowhere else to go. 28 years earlier, Rowan had arrived in Chicago carrying one backpack and a toolbox. His father had died in a factory accident when Rowan was 16, leaving his mother drowning in debt and illness. By the time Rowan turned 20, life had already beaten him harder than most people could imagine. He repaired engines during the day, cleaned garages at night, and often skipped meals to save money for his mother's medicine. One freezing afternoon changed everything. Rowan had been fixing a damaged forklift behind an old manufacturing warehouse when he met Elias Vance, a quiet 60-year-old janitor with rough hands and gentle eyes. Elias noticed Rowan shivering in the cold and silently handed him half of his sandwich. That simple act of kindness became the beginning of a bond neither of them expected. Elias wasn't educated. He never owned a business or held an important title. But he understood people. He saw the pain Rowan tried to hide behind stubborn determination. Day after day, Elias listened while Rowan spoke about his dreams of building safer industrial technology so workers would never die the way his father had. Most people laughed at those ideas. Elias never did. When Rowan couldn't afford rent, Elias secretly convinced the warehouse owner to let him sleep in an unused storage room. When Rowan wanted to quit after another failed prototype exploded during testing, Elias sat beside him all night in silence until sunrise. And when Rowan doubted himself most, Elias told him words that stayed with him forever: success built without gratitude becomes another form of poverty. Years passed. Rowan worked relentlessly. He built machines safer, smarter, and cheaper than competitors. Slowly, tiny investors started believing in him. Nexer Dynamics was born inside a cramped warehouse with leaking ceilings and second-hand equipment. Rowan became obsessed with protecting workers through technology, and his company exploded beyond anyone's expectations. Within 15 years, Nexer Dynamics became one of the largest industrial automation companies in America. But while Rowan's world transformed, Elias stayed the same humble man. Even after Rowan became wealthy, Elias refused expensive gifts or luxury apartments. He only accepted a small home near the river and continued visiting the original warehouse every Friday morning out of habit. To Rowan, Elias wasn't just an old friend. He was family. The father life had stolen too early. Now, on the morning of the billion-dollar acquisition, Rowan stood in a conference room surrounded by lawyers and investors discussing contracts thick as phone books. Across the polished table sat executives from Voltara Global, a powerful international corporation buying Nexar Dynamics for $10 billion. The deal would make Rowan one of the richest tech leaders in the world. Everything should have felt perfect. But Rowan couldn't shake an uneasy feeling growing inside him. During a short break before the final signing ceremony, Rowan stepped outside the conference room to clear his head. That was when he noticed commotion near the lobby entrance below. Through the glass balcony overlooking the lobby, Rowan saw security guards speaking harshly to an elderly man wearing worn-out clothes. His heart stopped instantly. It was Elias. The old man stood awkwardly clutching a small paper bag with grease stains spreading through the bottom. Rowan recognized it immediately. Every year before major company milestones, Elias brought homemade sweet rolls from the tiny bakery near the old warehouse. It was his tradition. But the security guards didn't know that. One of them blocked Elias from entering the elevator area while several executives nearby laughed quietly. Another guard looked irritated, embarrassed by the presence of a poor-looking old man inside such a luxurious building. People passing by avoided eye contact with Elias as if poverty itself were contagious. Rowan watched frozen in horror while one executive from Voltara casually muttered something that made the others smirk. Though Rowan couldn't hear every word from above, one sentence reached him clearly enough to cut through his chest like broken glass. This is exactly why old factories should be erased. The room around Rowan suddenly felt suffocating. Without warning, he rushed downstairs. The entire lobby fell silent when Rowan Mercer stormed across the marble floor toward the security guards. Reporters outside pressed cameras against the windows, sensing drama unfolding inside. Elias immediately looked uncomfortable seeing Rowan approach. The old man tried to smile softly despite the humiliation burning across his face. Rowan noticed the crushed paper bag trembling in Elias's hands. One sweet roll had fallen onto the polished floor. A young executive from Voltara glanced at Elias dismissively and said they were simply maintaining professional standards before international investors arrived. He spoke politely, but every word dripped with arrogance. Rowan stared at him for several long seconds. Then he bent down slowly, picked up the fallen sweet roll from the floor, and held it carefully in his hand like something priceless. The lobby remained silent enough to hear distant traffic outside. Rowan finally spoke, his voice calm but shaking with emotion. He said this man had fed him when he was starving. This man had believed in him when banks laughed at him. This man had protected his dreams when the world treated him like garbage. And if anyone inside that building deserved respect, it was Elias Vance. Nobody moved. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. One lawyer quietly suggested returning upstairs because media cameras were waiting and shareholders expected the signing to continue. That was when Rowan said the words nobody would ever forget. He announced that if Voltara could not respect the human being who helped build Nexar Dynamics from the ground up, then they did not deserve to own the company at all. Gasps spread through the lobby. The lead executive thought Rowan was bluffing. $10 billion was too massive to abandon over one emotional moment. Investors looked panicked. Lawyers whispered urgently. Reporters outside nearly trampled each other trying to capture better footage through the windows. But Rowan wasn't bluffing. He turned toward Elias and gently placed the crushed sweet roll back inside the paper bag. Tears filled the old man's eyes, though he tried desperately not to cry in front of everyone. Then Rowan walked directly back upstairs. Inside the conference room, tension exploded instantly. Board members begged him to reconsider. Investors warned him about financial disaster. Some accused him of destroying decades of work because of pride. But Rowan had already made peace with his decision. He looked around the massive room with its glass walls, expensive artwork, and billion-dollar contracts spread across the table. Then he remembered sleeping on cold concrete floors while Elias shared food he could barely afford himself. He remembered the nights Elias stayed awake encouraging him after failures. He remembered the promise he once made to never become the kind of rich man who forgets ordinary people. And suddenly, the answer became simple. Money could rebuild buildings. It could buy private jets, islands, fame, power. But it could never buy back dignity once lost. Rowan calmly closed the acquisition folder and walked away from the table. By sunset, news channels around the world exploded with headlines about the billionaire who rejected a $10 billion deal over disrespect toward an elderly janitor. Social media erupted with debates. Some people called Rowan foolish. Others called him the last decent billionaire alive. But the story didn't end there. The following morning, something extraordinary happened. Workers from Nexer Dynamics began sharing their own stories online about Rowan and Elias. Factory employees described how Rowan still visited warehouses personally to thank workers during holidays. Older mechanics revealed that Elias often spent hours mentoring struggling employees quietly without recognition. Former interns talked about Rowan paying college tuition anonymously for workers' children. Within days, public support became overwhelming. Customers praised the company's values. Independent investors offered new partnerships. Employees became more loyal than ever. And most surprisingly, several large corporations withdrew from Voltara partnerships after public criticism exploded across media platforms. The company Rowan supposedly destroyed became stronger instead. But none of that mattered most to Rowan. 3 weeks later, on a warm afternoon filled with sunlight, Rowan drove Elias to the old warehouse where Nexer Dynamics first began. Dust floated through golden beams of light entering broken windows. The original workbench still stood near the corner, covered in scratches from decades earlier. Elias moved slowly now because of age, but his eyes carried peace. Rowan helped him sit beside the old machine parts stacked against the wall. Neither man spoke much. They didn't need to. Some bonds become too deep for words. After several minutes, Rowan quietly handed Elias a framed photograph. It showed the very first team of Nexer Dynamics workers standing outside the warehouse 28 years earlier. In the center stood young Rowan covered in grease beside smiling Elias holding a toolbox. At the bottom of the frame, Rowan had engraved one sentence. The company was built by many hands, but it survived because one man chose kindness. Elias finally broke down crying. So did Rowan. And somewhere beyond money, headlines, and billion-dollar deals, two men sat inside an old warehouse remembering the years when hope was fragile and survival uncertain. Because in the end, the world often celebrates the people standing on stage while forgetting those who quietly held the ladder steady behind them. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Stories like these remind us that kindness is never wasted, and respect for others matters far more than wealth. And before this story ends, comment, "Respect builds legacy," if you believe true success means never forgetting the people who stood beside us during our hardest days. The truth is, many people spend their entire lives chasing money, power, and recognition. But Rowan Mercer understood something far greater. A fortune built without humanity eventually becomes empty. The people who help us rise deserve honor long after success arrives. Because one act of kindness can echo across decades, shaping futures in ways the world may never fully see. That day, Rowan Mercer did not lose $10 billion. He protected something far more valuable. His soul.